Imagine being suspended over 60 feet in the air, balancing on a rope no wider than your foot, while waves crash below and icy winds whip around you. All of this just to raise a piece of cloth. But that cloth was the only thing standing between life and death at sea. Today, you're going to discover what it truly meant to hoist a sail during the age of exploration, because out there, it wasn't just about skill. It was about survival. For a sailing ship of the 5th, 10th, and 16th centuries, the sails were the beating heart of life at sea. Controlling them was nothing short of a choreography of strength and precision, absolutely essential for survival. But how did sailors harness the wind? How did they raise and lower those massive sheets? And how did an entire crew coordinate this effort? From the towering mainmast to the smallest rope, every single component played a role. Today, we'll uncover the engineering and skill behind setting and striking the sails of the great ships that once ruled the oceans. To understand the intricate dance of the sails, we must first explore the anatomy of these powerful structures made of canvas and timber. Before even a single rope is pulled or a breeze caught, one must grasp every element that formed the complex propulsion system of a sailing ship. At the core stood the mast. Imagine it as the ship's spine, rising proudly from the deck skyward. Without masts, often several depending on the size of the vessel, there would be no foundation for sails. From the mizzenmast at the stern to the mainmast at the center and the foremast at the bow, these towering structures were the anchors of naval engineering. Attached horizontally to these masts were the yards like extended arms. They served as the main support for the square sails, allowing them to be raised, lowered, and adjusted to catch the wind. Though a sail may look like a simple sheet, it was a product of sophisticated craftsmanship. Typically made from fibers like linen for flexibility and hemp for strength, the material was woven into panels and stitched together by hand, often with double or even triple seams. But the strength wasn't just in the stitching. The edges and corners were reinforced with grommets and extra layers of canvas, enhancing durability against high winds. Larger sails had reefing points with eyelets that let sailors reduce the sail's surface area during storms. Many sails were treated with tar to repel water and mold, making them stiff and extremely heavy, especially when wet. Handling them required immense physical effort. While sails provided the power, ropes were the ship's tendons, a web of critical controls and safety lines. Most were made of hemp, valued for its toughness. The fibers underwent careful soaking and twisting processes. Multiple yarns were twisted into strands, which were then counter-twisted into powerful, nearly unbreakable ropes that resisted unraveling under stress. To increase their resistance to the harsh maritime elements, these ropes were often coated in tar, protecting them from seawater and decay, and extending their life on board. The variety of ropes aboard was astonishing. Each had a distinct function. Halyards lifted the yards and sails up the mast. Sheets and braces controlled the angle and rotation of the sail relative to the wind. Clew lines and tack lines helped shape and furl the sails when needed. In strong winds, reefing lines reduced the sail's exposure, offering vital protection for the vessel. The entire sail handling system was interconnected and meticulous. Every rope, beam, and stretch of canvas had a critical function. Mastering this complex anatomy was the first step to surviving any voyage across the treacherous Atlantic. Now that we understand the structure of the sails, how exactly were they hoisted? Raising the massive canvas and its yard began with careful preparation. Sailors would climb the shroud's rope ladders, attached to the mast to release the bindings securing the sail to the yard or deck. At the same time, on the deck below, halyards, the main ropes used for hoisting, were laid out and untangled to avoid any knots or snags. With the sail unbound and the halyards ready, the lifting began. Crew members took their positions across the deck and pulled in unison. It was a coordinated effort, synchronized by rhythmic work songs or chants that amplified collective strength. Slowly and steadily, The yard and its sail began to rise up the mast as the yard climbed higher. Sailors on the braces, ropes used to adjust the yard's angle, ensured it stayed level and moved smoothly. Constant adjustments were made to keep the process balanced and efficient, preventing the gear from swinging or twisting in the wind. The goal was to position the yard at the precise height, allowing the sail to fully open and catch the wind with maximum efficiency. Once the yard and sail reached their optimal position, the crew moved into the delicate stage of trimming and securing. Sheets attached to the lower corners of the sail were either tightened or loosened, adjusting the angle to best harness the breeze. At the same time, braces were used to rotate the yard horizontally, fine-tuning the exposure of the canvas when everything was perfectly aligned. The crew locked every line in place. Ropes were tied tightly to cleats or capstans across the deck, holding the sail in its working position. With teamwork, muscle, and precision, a once motionless vessel transformed into a wind-powered machine, ready to cut through the waves and venture into the unknown. Lowering the sail, however, was just as complex, if not more, especially when the sea turned violent. It wasn't simply about letting go of ropes. Sailors had to control the massive sheets of canvas and timber with extreme caution to protect both the ship and the lives aboard. The process began with releasing the tension. Sheets and braces that once held the sail steady were carefully eased, allowing the canvas to slacken and prepare for furling or dropping. That's when the buntlines came into play, ropes pulled from below that drew the center of the sail upward, gathering the heavy cloth against the yard like folding a giant curtain. This minimized the sail's surface area and gave the crew more control. With the sail partially gathered, halyards were slowly released. The yard then began its descent, carefully guided by sailors to avoid sudden drops that could damage the mast or the sail rigging. This step required close coordination and strength to prevent accidents. Once the yard was fully lowered, sailors had two options: either to furl the sail completely by wrapping it tightly along the yard and tying it down, or to reef it partially, a common tactic used in stormy weather. Furling kept the sail out of use, often removing it entirely and storing it in the sail locker, a protected area below deck. Reefing, however, allowed part of the sail to remain active, with reef lines threaded through horizontal rows of grommets to fold and secure excess fabric along the yard. Reefing was a vital maneuver when facing strong winds, helping to avoid torn sails or broken masts. It reduced strain on the rigging while still allowing navigation critical during volatile weather at sea. Both operations, furling and reefing, often required sailors to climb high up the masts, balancing on narrow footropes dozens of meters above the water. These men braved whipping winds, slippery ropes, and swaying yards just to roll and tie the heavy, wet canvas by hand. It was dangerous, demanding work calling for courage, agility, and complete mastery of one's balance. Raising and lowering sails wasn't just a technical task, it was a physically punishing ritual. The ocean offered no mercy. Rain poured relentlessly, icy gusts battered exposed faces, and salt water turned every surface slick. Sailors faced these challenges with no protection but their grit and the camaraderie of their crew. Each maneuver under those conditions was a true test of willpower and survival. A simple mistake could cost a life. A loosened rope could snap across the deck like a whip. A flailing sail caught in the wind could crush a man against the rigging. Falling from the mast or yard was often fatal. Every moment on deck in harsh weather was a gamble and ever-present risk accepted by those who lived and breathed the unforgiving sea. In that perilous environment, communication was a lifeline. Commands from the bosun or first mate rang out, piercing through the roar of the sea and the wind. Each shout was a precise cue in a delicate chain of movements. Work songs known as sea shanties weren't just tradition, they were tools. Their rhythm helped synchronize muscle and effort, turning chaotic labor into a harmonious act of coordination. These chants gave the men rhythm, unity, and focus. In a world without engines, the human voice and shared cadence became the engine of the ship, and behind it all, discipline reigned. Hierarchy was strict. Orders were obeyed instantly and without question. Every sailor from the youngest cabin boy to the seasoned helmsman knew his role. This rigid structure was what held the crew together in the worst of storms, beyond the rigging and the wind. The story of sailing is a story of survival. Every voyage was a gamble. Every sail raised was an act of bravery, and every return to port, a triumph of man over nature. If this journey into the heart of maritime history fascinated you, don't let it end here. Subscribe to Sailing Through History and join us as we uncover the secrets, struggles, and achievements of those who dared to conquer the seas. Hit that like button to keep the winds in our sails and set course with us on our next great adventure.